Good afternoon. Today is the 2nd of June, 2020, and I'm Paul Glumaz, and this is being brought to you by General Welfare Presents. All right. So since our last show, we're looking at a national insurrection of primarily anarchists, Antifa, and Black Lives Matter, which is not really African American. It's mostly white people. But you have this anarchists and vandalism and looting of stores and smashing of windows and all of this. And it's going on nationally. And they're roving gangs of people waiting for nightfall to go into the city, to the downtown area, and now going outside of the downtown areas of most cities into the suburban areas and even into larger communities in the more rural areas. And this is going on all over the country. Now, the important thing to understand about this is that it's occurring in the context of a saturated environment of, one, people being cooped up for the last 3 months because of the lockdown and the virus situation. 2, a culture of violence in video games, movies, what have you. So you have a lot of people that are in this violent kind of mindset. Many of the people who are going along with all of the Antifa and so forth are just people going along for the joyride. We're picking that up all over the place, and for the looting and for the pleasure of doing it. So we have this phenomena. But that's not the most incredible part of this phenomena. It's the media which is fanning it, which is excusing it, which is saying that Trump is causing this, which is it's about racism. It's not about racism. This is a full-blown insurrection being led by provocateurs who are being financed by billionaires, being financed by the British, basically the British Empire. Now, this is actually can be considered the 4th stage of the ongoing coup against the President of the United States. Okay. And the first stage, going into the president, when they failed to get him to resign before January 2017, when they failed to get Trump to resign before January 2017, they launched this whole Russia thing. When that failed, then came this enormous onslaught around the climate change, around the environment, and that was the second phase. That Trump was a climate denier and so forth and so on. This is the second stage of this assault, of this coup attempt. And then as that reached its apex, came the third stage, which was the whole impeachment hearings, the impeachment effort, the entire operation to keep the impeachment hearings going in the Senate. And so that was the third phase of the coup. So now we're in the 4th phase, which is the violence in the insurrection. Now, in order to deal with this, Trump has to call out perhaps the military, the National Guard, and what have you. And now we have governors intervening to say, well, not in my state. You have mayors intervening, not here. So you have this whole kind of, and then you have the incredible situation in Washington, D.C., where the president is, the violence is spreading in the vicinity of the White House, around the White House, and that mayor of Washington, D.C., and the police department of Washington, D.C. is absolutely not involved in any protection of the White House. They are saying, essentially, go ahead, do it. If you can get them and take them down, if you can kill them, fine. That's what's going on with the mayor and the police department of Washington, D.C. This is completely orchestrated. And the key player in all of this is the mainstream media, which is fanning this which is lying about what's happening, is fanning this all over the country, and is blaming it on Trump. Trump is causing this. People are upset with Trump. Trump is a racist. Trump is this. Trump is that. Trump is everything under the sun. And but they've been saying that from the very beginning. So this violent part of the insurrection is premised on the previous almost 4 years of activity and slander and attacks and vilification and labeling him a racist and so forth and so on. So this is, and that's going back even before that into the 2016 presidential campaign. So that's what you're dealing with. You're dealing with a cumulative effect of all of these things, and then you're using the anarchists and the Black Lives Matter and other organizations like that who are really not African American. The African American community does not appear to be very much involved in this. It is primarily the children of wealthy people. It's primarily people who are out for the joyride and are seeing the license to go out and loot, and then you have the professional provocateurs who are the Antifa crowd, which is the Black Bloc. Okay, so this is what you're talking about. Now, let us now go into where these anarchists come from. Okay, these anarchists have been cultivated over a number of decades. The core center of the manufacturing and creation of these anarchists over the last several decades is in Britain. It's in London. And the main group that has been developed for this is Black Bloc, which is a anarchist group. They dress in black, they wear masks, all of that, and they go on these rampages at various different times. And one of the rampages that Black Bloc did was in 1999 in Seattle, in the Seattle riots. We're not talking about the peaceful demonstration that took place with 50,000 people that were demonstrating on the weekend of the 1999 World Trade Organization event. What we're talking about, which is mainly trade unionists, what we're talking about is the riots. And these were coordinated by British subjects. The leadership came in from Britain directly, through Vancouver, through British Columbia. They trained people in the rural area of Washington, D.C., and where there was environmental camps that they trained in. And they came in and they ran this whole thing. Now, that was the outside part of the outsiders that came in to disrupt. But they had help from the inside. On one morning, they went and attacked the hotel where Madeleine Albright was staying. And Madeleine Albright ordered the mayor, Paul Schell of Seattle, to put in a curfew just as the peaceful demonstration was coming down with 50,000 people. And Paul Schell refused and waited for that peaceful demonstration to end, and then he put in a curfew. For that, Paul Schell was vilified and became very, very much by the establishment. That situation was supposed to go into a full explosion, and it didn't. It was somewhat contained. But this is where the anarchists originally came from for the Seattle, the leadership of the anarchists, a Black Bloc. Now, during the time of the discussions that were going on back in 2008 for dealing with the financial crisis, you had the emergence of something called Occupy Wall Street, Occupy Seattle, Occupy Vancouver, all of these things. And this whole thing, which was supposed to be against Wall Street, turned into this kind of all these other groups came in, and out of this, many people were recruited into anarchist and environmentalist organizations. You have violent environmentalist organizations that are also a part of this. Now, the Occupy Hong Kong, which took place in that period, was the seeding ground for the violent protesters that took place in Hong Kong that you're familiar with. It's the same billionaires, it's the same networks that are funding the anarchists here are funding the anarchists in Hong Kong. Now, to give you a sense of the methods of indoctrinating these people, there are, the way this works is, in the case of Antifa, it's through a process of labeling people. And then going through what Hitler did to people, what other people did, what white supremacists did, and essentially labeling everything in this way. And then what happens is you get people into these groups. And the indoctrination is on the basis of getting you to identify with so-called white, dead white European males, white financial people, what have you, as the enemy, and then getting in touch with your feelings, you know. And the reason, what they'll say is the reason there hasn't been a revolution is because people are not in touch with themselves. They're not in touch with their feelings, and they'll get you into these leaderless group discussions, leaderless group self-analysis, and to get you in touch with your feelings. And the idea, what they're doing is they're getting you in touch with your rage. And the way this works is you and then the rage is channeled on these different targets, and it's all based on labels. There's no rationality to it. Now, the principal idea behind the anarchist personality, who can also be a paid provocateur, is that freedom, the liberation of the person, comes in the act of violence. It's called purgative violence. And a Martinique psychologist by the name of Frantz Fanon developed this back in the late 50s and early 60s, in the 60s. And this purgative violence idea is, the oppressed people are liberated through the violence itself. And so it has a quality of Dionysian quality of letting go and just smashing everything, and that is the act, that is the revolutionary act, and then you live for doing that. And that is definitely the case when you study the events where Black Bloc has showed up and gone into the violent mode in London. This is what it's all about. And the way it works is, with the Black Bloc in London, is they show up wearing masks and so on and so forth, but they have a different life necessarily. You wouldn't know that some of them might be lawyers, some of them might be bankers, some of them might be this, some of them might be that, because they're wearing masks. And you have a similar situation going on where a lot of people are showing up who are participating in the violence, but they're not, you wouldn't necessarily associate them with that. So, and that's the kind of thing that's been developed over many years. And money, in the case of Hong Kong, a lot of money came from Chinese billionaires that are anti-China. A lot of it came from U.S. Endowment for Democracy and so on and so forth. And so our very media, which is supporting the Hong Kong violence as some kind of anti-China, anti-dictatorship, Chinese law coming into Hong Kong, they are the same ones doing the same thing to Trump. Which means that Trump should take a look at this very closely, because his administration, many of the people in his administration have been caught going along with this, along with Fox and everything else. But it's the same crowd. It's the same crowd doing the Hong Kong that's doing the whole operation here in the United States. Now, the same thing happened in Ukraine back in 2013, I believe, 2014. The same thing. The Western media, was completely on the side of these fascist anarchists who overthrew the government. And the same thing was going on there. You couldn't really go after them because you would be accused of violence. You would be accused of the bloody shirt of whoever of these fascists would be paraded. Like here, you can't really take out the anarchists without causing a huge media thing. And this is how they play it. And then because the police can't really do what they have to do, then it spreads. But more importantly, it also says, well, Trump is not popular. Trump, they can't control it. It's very similar to the corona virus. Either he opened up too soon or he didn't do enough. It's the same thing. It's an all-out assault on the president. So this is how it works. So we have billionaires supporting this. We have the media supporting this. And you have this violence being fanned out all over the country. And Trump is talking about bringing in the military. And he has ordered the National Guard. And state governments are refusing to go along. And there's even the possibility that the Attorney General, Bill Barr, will declassify documents on who's financing all of this. This would be really good because this would really nail the whole thing. Now you have to understand, this is the British Empire. This is the British Empire in its most desperate moment when things are not going very well. This would be very good if that were to happen like in the next few days, that the funders for Antifa, for for Black Lives Matter and other of these organizations, the billionaires funding it, the foundations that are funding it, would come out. And that would be fantastic. The support base. Because you cannot have this kind of insurrection without the funding. You cannot have this insurrection without the behind-the-scenes support. You cannot have this insurrection without the media support. And this is very important. This is very important that this be revealed. Now, how do we deal with this situation where we had the virus, the lockdown, it's opening up, but it's really not opening up much. Large portions of the population that are out of work. Large portions of small businessmen may never come back. How do you deal with this? How do you keep society together during this period? And this is pretty much the responsibility of the institution of the presidency. Why? Because the president represents a universal, not a particular. He's the president of the entire nation, whether you like that or not. And so he represents a universal, not a particular group, not African American, not Latino, not white, not rich, not poor, etc., etc., etc. The president represents the universal. And it's the president who has the responsibility to act. Now, there are provisions in the law for the president to take the military and go do it, take care of this thing. And this has been done before. Eisenhower did this a few times. There were other presidents who did this a few times. And he may have to do that. But the important thing is beyond that. The important thing is that the president has to project a future to get us through this crisis. And that future was presented on Saturday with the launching of the Dragon on the Falcon, which was SpaceX Elon Musk. And this was the first time that U.S. went back into manned space in a very long period of time. But this is not about just that. This is about developing the technology to have a capability to go from the lunar orbit onto the moon and back to Earth in a very efficient sort of way, and be able to begin to develop the industrial capability of developing the moon as the base for the future exploration of the solar system. And from this will come incredible economic benefits, technology, helium-3 for fusion. I mean, this is just the beginning. This future, when presented to the population, is very significant. But it's very interesting. The mainstream media did not cover the launch very much. They did not cover Trump's speech during the launch, after the launch, very much. They are keeping this pretty much from the population. But the idea that the United States is now going to seriously revive an effort to go into the space, to develop space, to use that as the basis for the technology for the future leapfrogging economically of the United States is very, very, very significant. It's very important. Now, Trump wants to get a $2 trillion infrastructure program going as soon as possible, but he's being blocked by the Democrats in the House of Representatives. No surprise there. Because it's all about the next 5 months going into the elections. And then the next 5 months, whether or not you as a voter have a sense that there is a future, will have a big role in whether and how you're going to vote, or whether you're going to vote. So this insurrection that's going on is just a stage in the coup process. Now, the Spectator, back in the time that President Trump was elected, in the British press, laid it out that either we get him to resign, either we get Trump to resign, or he gets impeached, or he gets assassinated. They said that. So we now have an environment in Washington, D.C. where without where the media is now taunting our president for being in the bunker or for hiding. While at the same time, the mayor of Washington, D.C. and the police department of Washington, D.C. is refusing to protect the White House, or is refusing to protect the area under their jurisdiction around the White House. Okay, so this environment for assassination is growing. That is potentially the next part of this process, that the British will be running another assassination of a U.S. president, and that is part of the preparation for that. They assassinated Kennedy. They assassinated McKinley. The British assassinated Garfield, and they assassinated Lincoln. They did those assassinations. The British intelligence ran those assassinations through networks in the United States. So now, there's another aspect to this, which is very, very important. It's the way the American people are responding in their communities. This is not being picked up in the media, but there's a different response going on in the communities around the country. I happen to know this from discussions with many people in various communities, that they're not responding to this in the same way that the media is. There's a growing solidarity within many of these communities around the fact that, yes, the injustice that occurred in the murder of Mr. Floyd is bad. But where are these people coming from? They're not African Americans. They're not. It's not about race. These are anarchists. These are people that are just causing problems. How did that get in there? And then as it spreads out to the community. So we're seeing a self-activation in many of the smaller communities, cities of 100 to 200,000 and smaller, where people are showing up with, armed to protect property, to protect shops and so forth and so on. Of course, that's a potential for a confrontation. But whenever Antifa has showed up and those people have been there, they have not wanted to tangle with those people. But the fact that that's going on is an indication. We're not getting, the African American community is not supporting the violence. So there is this process going on that the media isn't covering, which is a change in the population's perception of the media, increasing change of the perception of the media and so forth. And I have good reason to suspect that the next 5 months are going to be an effort to bring down Trump, bring him down, if not assassinate him. Because the population in general is not buying in to what the media is saying. And the Trump organization and Donald Trump will fight, and they will fight with a certain idea of what a future must look like. And so you can contrast Biden's major campaign ad to Trump's major campaign ad. Biden's major campaign ad is about race, nothing else. Race, injustice, race, what have you. Trump's campaign ad, which is a few minutes long, is about going into space. It's quoting Kennedy. It's the sound of Kennedy speaking. It's about the future. It's about what we can do. Two totally different messages, two totally different paradigms, two totally different situations. So this is the kind of advertising you're going to get from the Biden campaign. Is all about race, racial injustice, racism. Trump is a racist, whereas the campaign of Donald Trump is going to be about the future, the economic potentials, science, and so forth. So this is going to be a very contrasted election. And the people who are going to gravitate as activists in the Biden campaign are going to be in a violent mood against the president of the United States. And the people who will be coalescing around the Trump campaign are going to be in a mood against the media and against the institutions and against those people who are involved in supporting the violence. So this is the kind of thing that you can expect to occur as we go into this crisis. Now, we need the economic program of Lyndon LaRouche. 50 million jobs in the U.S., 2.5 billion jobs internationally. And so a very key component of this, as we go forward, as the deep state is fully exposed, as perhaps indictments occur around the Flynn case, around the unmasking, the potential occurs for also the beginning of the exoneration of Lyndon LaRouche, which is very, very important to creating the environment of optimism around the economic policies which Trump is going to have to adopt, because he hasn't made the break with Wall Street, the financiers and so forth, which he's going to have to do. So we are in quite a period of history, and I must say I'm looking forward to what's coming.